Okay, for your video number 2 for notes for Pythagorean Theorem, I have this here again, the vocab, along with another picture of how you can use the Pythagorean Theorem in a right triangle, just because I want you to keep coming back to what the Pythagorean Theorem is and when it is used. So the legs, again, since you should already have this in your notes from video 1, I'm not going to write all of the things, but for legs, I want you to put A and B. And you might even put shortest legs or shortest sides. How about shortest sides? So it's the A and the B, it's the shortest sides. The hypotenuse is the C, it is the longest side. And keep in mind that this, again, only happens in a right triangle. So the A and the B are the two shorter sides, and the C, the hypotenuse, is the longest side. The A and the B are legs, and A could be here, B here, or A could be here, B here. They are interchangeable as long as you know they are both the legs, and the hypotenuse is the side opposite the right angle. The legs are the two sides that are adjacent to the right angle. Okay, review video 1 if you forgot about some of that vocab that I was talking about. Okay, today and here's the formula. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. The reason this video is different is because sometimes you have the hypotenuse and you have one leg, but now we're missing the other leg. So the previous video, we were missing all the hypotenuses. This one, we're missing legs. So I gave you the longest side and I gave you one of the legs, but I'm missing the other leg. So I still want you to start by doing A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And I'm going to show you algebraically with algebra how to solve this. And then I'm going to show you a shortcut too. So pay attention to both ways and do which one works for you, best for you. Remember the longest side, the hypotenuse, is the C. So we have to put 10 in for C squared. So that has to go there. You can't interchange any of the longest side. The A and the B, though, don't matter. So we have a 9 for one and a question mark for the other. So I'll just put in 9 for my A squared. It doesn't matter, though. And I'm just going to leave B squared, B squared. I'm going to call this B, and I'm going to say we don't know what B is. So we're just going to leave it B. We're going to leave it B. Okay, 9 squared I can solve. 9 times 9 is 81. Put it in your calculator if you're not sure. And we're going to leave B squared, B squared. 10 squared is 100. 10 times 10 is 100. Put it in your calculator if you don't believe me. All right, we have done an extensive unit on solving equations. So if you were to try to solve this equation and get B by itself, the next step you would do is get rid of the 81 by subtracting it. So just work this out with me and see what happens. They would cancel on the left, leaving B squared alone. So we would bring down B squared. I'm starting to write tinier because I know I'm going to run out of room. 100 minus 81 is 19. So I'm down to the last step where I have B squared and I have 19. And I know it's not appropriate for 19 to be the answer, because if I were to come over here and put 19, let's look and see if that makes sense. 9 is a leg, 19 is a shorter leg, and 10, the longest side, the hypotenuse is 10? No, because 19 would have been the longest side. So I know 19 is wrong, but that's because that's what B squared is. So remember from our previous video, the last step, if you have something squared, you need to unsquare it, which means find the square root of it. So we're going to say B squared is 19, so that B would be about whatever the square root of 19 is. So on my calculator, square root button is a shift, and then this little button above here, it looks like a check mark with a divide. That's the square root of 19, and that is about that 3 is going to get bumped up to a 4.4. So now let's see if that one is appropriate. 4.4 over here on the shortest side. 4.4, the longer side is 9, the longest side is 10. Yes. So that is completely appropriate, and we know we did it right. Okay, that's how to solve every single one. You can move it around and solve it with an equation. If you are somebody who likes shortcuts, here's what I want you to know. In the previous video, we added because we were trying to find the longest side. If we're trying to find one of the shorter sides, instead of adding these together, we could subtract them. So I hope that makes sense to you. I'm going to show you what I mean. If the longest side is 11, if the hypotenuse is 11, we could just do 11 squared minus the leg length that we know, which is 5 squared. And that's going to equal our missing A or B side. It doesn't matter. I'll call it A squared side. So 11 squared is 121. Use your calculator if you're not sure. 5 squared is 25. Let's see what 121 minus 25 is. 121 minus 25 is 96. That to me is a lot faster than doing all of this subtract 81 to both sides, then get 19, square root 19. Like, well, we're not quite done though, because 96 is obviously not the length of this side. If the longest side is 11, 96 is not right, but we need to still square root it because that's what A squared is. So the square root of 96 is about 9.8. So A is about 9.8. So again, you have your option. 9.8 is appropriate, yes, for this side. You have your option of doing it like just fill in the A and B and subtract it to the other side and then square root it and all of that, which is basically the same thing I did here. I just didn't really set it up like an equation. I just subtracted because I have the longest side. So please don't get that mixed up. When you're like on the previous video up above, you added because you had the two shorter legs. We were looking for the hypotenuse. But now that you have the hypotenuse, you're subtracting to find the missing leg, and you're squaring it each time. You're just subtracting instead. So I'm going to keep using this method because I think this is a little bit quicker, and I think you guys will probably like it better too. So I'm going to take my longest hypotenuse side, which is 19, and I'm going to square it, and then I'm going to subtract the leg that we know, which is 16 squared. And that's going to equal my missing side. And I'm just randomly picking B. I mean, I think one time I picked B and one time I picked A. So it doesn't matter. Pick your favorite letter, A or B. And then just solve this one. So 19 squared is 361 minus 16 squared, is 256. And if you go ahead and subtract those two and find out the difference, 361 minus 256, that is 105. And then you're basically done. You just need to square root both sides to find that final, what B is by itself. So the square root of 105 is 10.2. So B is about 10.2. Okay, so again, add it if you have the two shorter legs. Subtract it if you are missing one of the legs. All right, number 4. 8 is the hypotenuse because you can see it's across from, it's opposite of the right angle. So 8 is the longest side. We're going to subtract a leg from it. I forgot that we're squaring them, and that's going to equal one of your leg lengths, A or B, whichever one you like. 8 squared is 64. 6 squared is 36. 64 minus 36 is 28. I'm going to square root 28 to find what A is. And I know it's not going to come out evenly, so I'm putting about. Square root of 28 is about 5.3. That's going to bump up to a 5.3. And I always like for you guys to check for reasonability. Make sure that if this side is 5.3, it actually makes sense. These are the two shorter legs, and it equals the longer hypotenuse. And this one does work. That seems appropriate. All right, number 5. The hypotenuse, the long leg is 8. So we're going to do 8 squared minus one of the shorter legs, which is 2 squared. And that's going to equal my missing leg side. I'm going to call it B, my leg length. 8 squared is 64. 2 squared is 4. 64 minus 4 is 60. And that is definitely not an appropriate amount, and that's because we haven't square rooted it yet. Once you square root it, the square root of 60 is about 7.7. That to me is much more appropriate. Let's see, 7.7, yes, because the longest side was 8. Okay, last one of these that I'm going to do with you in notes, and then I'd like for you to try a few on your own. Our longest hypotenuse side is 16, so we're going to do 16 squared. We're going to subtract the leg, and that's going to equal, we'll call this side a squared. All right, 16 squared, I feel like we did that just a second ago, and now I can't find where it's at. So I'll just do it again. 16 squared is 256. 6 squared is 36. 256 minus 36 is 220. And 220 equals a squared. So last step is we need to square root it to find out what just a is. The square root of 220 is about 14.8. Okay, I would love for you to pause the video now and go to the next page and try just the 4 at the top where it says try it on your own and see how you do on finding the missing leg length. Okay, if you're not quite ready to try it on your own, or if you're ready to check, these are the answers you should have gotten. 5 is definitely the hypotenuse. It's the longest leg. So you're going to need to subtract the other leg 2 from that to get your other missing leg length. So 5 squared is 25. 2 squared is 4. 25 minus 4 is 21. And then you still need to take the square root of 21, which is about 4.6. So the missing leg length in number 7, you should have gotten about 4.6. Okay, number 8, the longest leg, the hypotenuse is 7. So I'm going to take 7 squared and I'm going to subtract the other leg that I know, which is 5 squared, to get my missing leg length over there. So 7 squared is 49. 5 squared is 25. If you take 49 and subtract 25, you get 24. But that is not our leg length. That's what b squared is. So we're going to square root both sides to get the approximate answer of the square root of 24, which is about 4.9. The 8 is going to get bumped up to a 9. So 4.9. Always check for reasonableness to see if that's reasonable for that answer to be 4.9. And it is. All right, second to last one, the hypotenuse is 11. So I'd take 11 squared and I would subtract the 8 squared to get my a squared. 11 squared is 121. 8 squared is 64. When you subtract 121 minus 64, you get 57. And that is definitely not the answer, but that's what a squared equals. So we're going to square root it now. The square root of 57 is about 7.5. So about 7.5. All right, last one. Our hypotenuse in this last one is 7. So it's going to be 7 squared minus our leg, which is 2 squared, to equal our missing side length here. 7 squared is 49. 2 squared is 4. 49 minus 4 is 45. 45 is not our answer, but that's what b squared is. So we are going to square root it. The square root of 45 is about 6.7. So the leg length is about 6.7.